material. All right, let's do a quick review. So, why should every Christian study apologetics? Well, I gave a couple of reasons. And I did not give the puppy dog barking reasons. My reasons were because it was mine was a personal story of how I doubted that there was a God, and how I went through that time of trying to find answers to my questions. So for me, I think we do need to respond to our culture, but it needs to be out of a person who themselves is transformed, who is growing in the knowledge of God, who is seeking God, who is loving others. And that's always been how Christians have transformed the world, is through their own individual relationship with Jesus Christ, through their own transformation in the Lord. That's how they become so effective, communicating to the world about Jesus Christ. So we talked about answering doubt, building confidence, and changing lives as the path that I took towards, my path in apologetics. And that's usually why I talk to people about why we should be doing apologetics, because it can answer doubt, which builds confidence and ultimately can change your life. So apologetics is quite a broad field, if you're not already noticing that, as you can see from the questions. So where does a person start? Right? Where do they start? Well, a couple of ideas. First of all, you can start with questions you're currently facing. So either they might be your own questions about belief in God, how do I know this, or why do I say this about God? Or you may know a person who's been asking you questions. God's giving you the place to start. Answer those questions first. The reason I'm involved with Islam was because I met a former Muslim. And he was involved with ministry to Muslims, as well as Marie's husband. So the reason I'm involved with Islam is because that's what was right in front of me, was this gentleman who had been involved with Islam in his past, who grew up Muslim. So I didn't just jump into apologetics and go into this broad range, or just jump into Islam. I actually started answering my own doubts, and then later on I got into Islam because that's what was right in front of me. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Don't worry about trying to just get all this information and shove it into your head, right? My head would explode if I tried to do that. So start with what's in front of you. Throughout the time that we've been together, I've thrown out some names to you of places to start, like Nancy Piercy. There are some other places that you can go. You can start with my work. Why Do You Believe That? It's very introductory, and then it has, where do you go from there? It has places to go. It has lots of other resources. Defending the Faith, the burgundy book that I brought with me, which, you know, it says Apologetics and Women's Ministry, but when you look at the back of it, there's individual questions, some of the questions that you've asked me today, and it gives you the resource to answer those questions. Like, are you asking this? Here's where you can find that. So it's like a list in the back of that book. You can also find more resources on my website. I recommend other books and other websites. A book that I have not yet mentioned, which is the book that I gave my mom, that she said, I understand that book. Like, I'd given her a bunch of books. This one, she said, oh, I understand that one. It's called The Reason for God. It's by Timothy Keller. That's a very good place to start in apologetics. If you just say, I'm interested in the field, I don't really have questions that I can, like, I'm not asking this question, nobody's asking me that question, but I like this field, The Reason for God is a great place to start. Timothy Keller built his church in New York based on preaching apologetics and answering hard questions. And his church just grew like crazy, right? Because he's actually engaging with all these hard and difficult questions people have. And then if you haven't yet read any of Lee Strobel's works, Lee Strobel, he wrote The Case for Christ. And he wrote The Case for Faith. And he wrote The Case for the Resurrection. No, that's not his. Case for Creation. He's coming out next year with The Case for Grace. Isn't that cool? The Case for Grace. So Lee Strobel's works. Actually, The Case for Christ was the book that I found when I was doubting. But I found a book that was harder than that in our church library. I tried to read it. But I was busy. I was working. I was teaching band. And not just any, I told you 400 kids. We were a competitive marching band. So I started reading one book and it was just too much for me and I had to put it down. So I was having to look up words every 5 minutes. So I was having to look up a new word like metaphysical. So I went, that's not going to work for me. I found Lee Strobel's book and I went, okay, I can do that. I can do that. So those are some good places to start. The best way that I have found to get started in defending your faith is to start talking to people. Like they give you the material. They say, here's my question. Even recently, I was having some physical therapy done. And the lady said, Mary Jo, what is it that you're doing? What are you writing? Because that's why I'm in there. She's battling my writing, my thoracic outlet syndrome. All my muscles are getting cramped up from writing. And she said, what are you writing? And I said, oh, I'm writing a study on belief in the existence of God. And she goes, I'm sorry, how did you get involved with that? Right? And I started talking to her about it, and I told her a little bit about my testimony. And she said, oh, that's my problem. That church people are just a bunch of hypocrites. I've had troubles going to church because there's just so much hypocrisy in the church. I went, okay, there you go. There's some that would direct me towards answering that question because she needs that answered. So I just sort of go with, what's the question for me? Start talking to people. So we learned, now I say start conversing with people, we learned and reviewed 4 basic elements of good conversation. Starts with knowing what you believe. There's no way around it. Got to know what you believe. If you're a Christian and you profess Jesus as the resurrected Lord and Savior, you should know why and what that entails. And then you have to listen to others, which I think that's the harder part for people because they want to offer instead of listen. And you have to humble yourself before God and then allow people to be who they are, where they're at on their journey. Question, we talked about that, and then asking enough questions. You need to ask more questions. Again, I can't say that often enough. Please ask people to defend what they believe and get at the truth and the source of their beliefs. And then respond to people. That takes a little bit more work, right? Because when you have a question before you, if you don't know the answer, you have to be willing to find out. So, and we also talked about helping our society use good reasoning. That starts with us. Do we know what good reasoning is? Are we critical thinkers? Do we analyze what we see and hear? Or are we uncritical about what we allow into our minds? So it actually starts with us, and then we're able to give what we learn out to others. I talked about Christians not conversing in part because of a lack of confidence. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to build, hopefully some of the Q&A has been building up confidence in what you believe. I don't know if it has or not, but that's one of the reasons I want to do Q&A with you. And then, I said Christians should be asking a lot more questions, since everyone has a view of the world for which they should be able to give reasons. Everyone. All right, so we should be discerning, of course, as you go out from here, be discerning in your conversations with others, knowing when to point out flawed reasoning. And yes, you should point out flawed reasoning. Tell people that they're just attacking you. They haven't offered you an argument. Because our society thinks an attack on you, calling you names, is an argument. Right? Help them see this is not an argument. So saying Christians are stupid, it's the same thing as being a little kid on the playground and calling names. We are adults and we must engage in hard thinking. Okay, so help them to see that. Know when to say I don't know. Never fake it. Never make up answers. Again, if you guys ask me something I have no answer for, I'll just tell you that. I don't know. And on that point, let me share with you, that seems really basic, but when I was teaching up in Oklahoma, I had a ladies group, and I was talking on how the term faith is being redefined to mean something it didn't traditionally mean in the Christian faith. And when I got done, I was doing Q&A, a lady asked me a question, and I said, you know what, I really don't know the answer to that. I'd be willing to email you if you want to carry on the conversation. After the conference was done, I'm sitting down having lunch, and a lady came up to me and she said, you know, I was raised around Christians, and I had a lot of questions. And you know, in 30 years, I never heard a person say to me, I don't have an answer. I don't know. I had never heard a Christian say something like, I do not know. She said, and so I learned to distrust the church, because I know that humans can't have all the answers. She said, they kept telling me they did, but I knew the truth was there's no way that they could have all the answers. So she said, I learned to distrust people who went to church, the church body. And she said, today, hearing you say, I don't know, it freed me up to be able to tell my friend that I'd become a Christian. It was just from, I don't know. That was it. It's very powerful when you speak the truth in love. Okay? So don't even think that saying I don't know doesn't have an impact on people. And also, and also, know when to end a conversation if it's not productive. That takes practice. Okay, so just don't feel bad about ending a conversation if it's not going anywhere. Because not everybody's interested in finding truth. So be ready to say, I need to move on from this. Be ready to say, you know, here's where we're at, but I'm going to have to move along. And then pray for them. Trust them. Trust God with them. Excuse me.